Hey guys, I'm Tara and welcome back to Reviewniforms. Yay! The channel where I react, rant, rave, and review uniforms from all over the world, from all walks of life, and today we are doing the camo edition. That was so cheesy, but I'm cheesy. Y'all know this. All right, guys, I'm ready. Let's see the very first camo look.
It's not unheard of to come across examples of some wildly unique camouflage patterns.
Whoa, we're starting off big with this first. It's not lime green, but this is very, very bright green. I mean, this is bordering on neon. So I've never seen this before. So I'm really, really excited to see some of these very different camos. Today, I am sporting a very American, all-American. Yes, that's how cool I look today in my camo.
Be it because of their colors, what they're used for, or just the design overall.
Okay, sorry to stop so quickly again, but the blue camo, at first glance, this is kind of cool. It looks cute and unusual because I haven't seen it. But can you explain to me why in the world you would want to have blue camo when you're on a ship? I know there's got to be a reason, but in my mind, I'm just seeing this scenario where there's like a man overboard and like everyone's looking and they're like, Captain, I can't find him. Where's Frank? And Frank's like, I'm right here. And they can't see him because he's in blue camo in the water. This is how my mind works. I'm always thinking about uniform stuff.
However, it's not often you see full words placed into them. But that was not the case with three distinct designs used by three different units within Ivory Coast. To best understand the reasoning for this rather curious decision requires a look at the country's history, specifically the era where it was plunged into not one, but two civil wars.
Poor Africa, they're always in the throes of a civil war, it seems like. To us, we would call it an uprising. To them, they call it a Tuesday. They ought to know a lot about camo, so let's see what they've got.
Out of this, a rebel coalition calling themselves the Forces Nouvelles de Côte d'Ivoire, or New Forces of Ivory Coast, made up of various political parties as well as supporters of Ouattara and even the recently killed General Guy, began fighting the government, leading to the outbreak of the First Ivorian Civil War. Now, this is where the first camouflage comes into play. During this time, a variety of uniforms were seen with a somewhat general breakdown of them contingent upon different military branches.
Okay, so I'm stopping here on this picture of the guy with the red beret. You can see he's got a beret on, he's got a kind of a flight suit on, and I can count maybe 4 or 5 different kinds of camouflages in here. And this has got to be incredibly confusing.
Police forces and departments overall. However, that wasn't always the case, and when mutinying soldiers as well as rebel forces began capturing cities, a number of these uniforms began being used by them. The two most common designs were copies of France's Europe Center, sometimes simply known as CE or CCE, and the US Woodland, more colloquially known as M81 Woodland.
This is US Woodland right here that I'm sporting. What do you think? I wouldn't make it one day in the military, not one day. All props to soldiers everywhere.
Naturally, because of the war breaking out, quite a number of uniforms bearing these patterns.
I know we're talking about the American Woodland right now, but this guy over here is sporting a blue and green, which is kind of like when I squint, if you squint and hold your mouth just right, it looks like he's wearing tie-dye. So for me, he's giving Army at Grateful Dead concert. That's what this is giving me. That's what I'm getting.
Began being used by the Forces Nouvelles, often referred to by its initialism of FNCI. Of course, this left the government with the real issue of possibly mistaking some of their forces with those of their enemy. Things were so similar that the military at the time was referred to as the FANCI, or Forces Armées Nationales de Côte d'Ivoire.
Wow, those names are really close. Can you imagine having a war with two foes that their names and their uniforms and everything looks exactly the same? How do you know who you're supposed to fight? Let's see how they figure this out.
Translated to the National Armed Forces of Ivory Coast. So what did they do? Well, they created the FANCI camouflage. That little bit of wordplay and humor aside, this camouflage, first appearing in 2003, not long after the outbreak of the war, was quite literally them orienting the initialism FANCI diagonally and slapping it onto a copy of US Woodland.
So essentially what this is the US Woodland with a watermark. They've just taken the FANCI, which is really cute that it spells the word fancy, and they've just watermarked it up and down the fabric. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. So I'm not sure how I feel about it. My heart and my head are having a civil war inside my body. So I will let you know in a moment how I feel about the fancy.
Now, at this point, one could argue that the fancy pattern was simply a design created for just looks or prestige, only to be worn by high-ranking officers and select specialty units.
So that makes sense. This is a literally fancy garment that has been created to be worn at special events and by special people. And I get that, because my whole concern was that you really can't see it close up. I mean, you'd have to get pretty damn close to your enemy to see a watermark on his uniform. So that makes me really, really nervous. But the fact that they were only using it for officials and fancy stuff, okay, it makes sense. I'm warming up to it now.
Well, that may be true, but with the creation of this brigade, that changed. Photos of members showed a variety of uniforms, with the most common camouflage ones being the fancy pattern.
Okay, so we were wrong. It did make its way down to the ranks and everybody was wearing this uniform. I mean, it looks cool, but the application of it and having to be so close to your enemy, I believe, to see the difference in the watermark just makes me a little nervous.
Which leads one to a safe assumption that particular design was chosen, at least in this case, to discern government troops from that of rebels, at least until the reunification and military restructuring processes were completed. Seeing French and UN forces actively engaging Gbagbo's supporters and positions, many remaining governmental troops switched sides, some of which took their fancy camouflage with them, thus more or less bringing its specialty connection and purpose to an end.
Okay, so this is what I was talking about before. You know, they have a lot of switching sides and a lot of civil war and a lot of new factions and groups come from these militias in Africa. And so, yeah, when the fancy guys some of them decided to change sides, they took their uniforms with them. So everything began to get all mixed up anyway.
Come April 11th, Gbagbo's residence was stormed, leading to his arrest and the end of the Second Civil War. It wasn't long until the rather unique camouflage would start to be taken out of circulation and removed, as the FANCI ceased to be, being replaced by the RFCI, the force that defeated them. So here's a quick look at the full uniform made of the fancy camouflage. What is known, though, is it bears a rather unique camouflage that came about during the chaotic period in the country's history and actually helped, at least in a way, spawn a whole new way the government looked at camouflage.
I have been thinking this whole time that this is reminding me of something, and I finally remember it's reminding me of Balenciaga sweaters. And Balenciaga does sort of the same thing. It's not on camo. I don't know if Balenciaga had seen this and kind of bit their style. I don't know, but the fancy uniform is definitely very interesting. So, how many Reviewnicorns do I give to the fancy camo of the Ivory Coast soldiers? I'm gonna give them one Reviewnicorn. And you guys, this is because while I do think the look of it is cool, it's almost like a streetwear look. And maybe it's the Balenciaga sweater that's coming into my mind, but I do like the idea of the look of it with the watermark, and especially because they have a cool name, fancy, fancy, fancy. But I just cannot get on with the idea that it's just slapped on the American woodland pattern, and there's so many other soldiers in the American woodland pattern that it would be impossible to distinguish between militias and know who is who. So it seems kind of not well thought out and a little dangerous, which is probably why it didn't stick around very long. But I'm glad it exists, and I'm glad we got a chance to review it. All right, guys, I'm ready for the next one.
This is good camouflage. This is bad camouflage. Exactly. From 2002 to 2004, the US military invested $5 billion in over a decade of research developing this camouflage pattern, and the design, aptly named Universal Camouflage Pattern, quickly became iconic.
I feel like this pattern is iconic. When I see this, I used to call it like desert digital in my mind. I totally equate that with the US military.
Anyone who sees it can instantly recognize it as US Army camouflage. According to one Army specialist, this camouflage pattern was a, quote, universal uniform that universally failed in every environment.
Damn! That is a sick burn. It is a uniform that failed in every environment. I'm telling you, as a uniform designer, if anyone were to say anything like that about a uniform that we created, I would go to the factory, crawl under a sewing machine, and never come out. Period.
For decades, all military personnel had used the standard battle dress uniform, which looks like this. It worked fine and seemed to do the job, but when Y2K hit, so did the peak of art-inspired military design that had been crescendoing for decades. In the late 1990s, a military officer named Timothy O'Neill, who some call the grandfather of modern camo and others called Tim, developed camouflage on his computer using pixels. It turns out that pixel-based designs act as white noise to the brain. Basically, because pixel camouflage looks less like nature, the brain becomes less fixated on it and thus ignores it as part of the background.
Okay, so that makes perfect sense to me, that our brain sees pixels and blends them together into the background, which it kind of makes me think of those pictures, you know, that you kind of like have to stand back and cross your eyes and then you like see it, but you don't see it. So yeah, the pixel thing makes sense to me. So if it makes so much sense, then why do they hate it so much? We're gonna find out.
A lot of military branches started to take notice. As with most military strategies, the Marines were first in, last out. In 2000, they wanted to duplicate this Canadian camouflage design known as CAD-PAT.
Not us copying the Canadians, sorry.
Because of its trendy pixelation and striped lapels. But those greedy Canadians had copyrighted the pattern, so the Marine leaders had to make their own different enough version that wouldn't get them sued. After making a trip to Home Depot to look for paint swatches, that's not a joke, military officials actually went to Home Depot, they landed on Ralph Lauren's Coyote Brown. Coyote Brown became the centerpiece of two color palettes, one for forests and one for deserts, the overarching design coined Marpat for marine pattern camouflage. The thing is, this pattern, with 4 distinct colors that made up its camouflage pattern, worked. Meanwhile, the Army needed a new camouflage design
Just wishing the Army dripped hard like the Marines. Honestly, the Marines are probably like, stop trying to bite our style. Like, they know they're the best dressed in all of the military, and they're just like tired of everyone trying to like get all up in their stuff.
They didn't have matching camouflage sets at the time, so soldiers were basically walking targets on the battlefield. Army wanted something like the Marines' great Marpat pattern, but because the Marines didn't want the Army stealing their hard-earned survival rates, the Marines had copyrighted their camouflage, and instead of just paying the Marines to use it, the Army decided to take some creative liberties with their own knockoff design known as the Universal Camouflage Patterns. They made the decision to eliminate any blacks and browns from the design, arguing that these colors didn't exist in combat environments, and opted for Desert Tan 500 as the camouflage's central color.
Okay, so I think this is where they start to go wrong. They're eliminating the dark colors and the contrast colors. It's like, I'm trying to see where they're going with this.
Well, it turns out it was really bad at camouflaging soldiers, especially compared to the Marine patented Coyote Brown, which had been the key to making Marpat so effective. And to top it off, they didn't test the design before slapping it on thousands of spongy 19-year-olds and shipping them to the desert to pay for college.
This is what really grinds my gears. I mean, my mind is blown. Not testing this pattern in the field is bonkers. I mean, I've got restaurant clients, and we always, before making a big change, we always do a test in a certain market that's a certain percentage of the clientele or the people who are going to be wearing the uniform, just to make sure that this works. This is not rocket science, you guys. You got to test it. And I can imagine that there are millions of these that they produced and made and put out there without testing them. If it was awesome, then great. But actually, it sucked. That's bad.
The pattern, named Urban Track, was composed of tan, gray, and sage green, and soon after it was approved in 2004, soldiers started to notice its flaws. Its macro pattern, or the collective camouflage effect of the whole uniform, didn't work. The pixels made up distinct blobs of color meant to disguise them, but the problem was, these blobs were actually too small and created an effect known as isoluminance, which means the entire uniform appeared as a visible tan mass rather than a blitz of colors difficult to separate from each other.
So we all just learned a new vocabulary word today, isoluminance. That makes perfect sense. If the pixels are too small, then they all blend into one color at a certain distance, and then you just don't get any contrast. That soldier or that thing that is patterned really starts to stand out and almost glow a little bit from the surroundings, hence the isoluminance. Look how smart we are. Learning things. This is a learning channel. I'm a teacher. Well, I'm not a teacher. I learned it from here. But now we know it. We're so smart.
This effect made the camouflage appear flat in a three-dimensional environment. The camouflage failed to do its job. Given how exposed the pattern made troops in the Middle East, with its high levels of sand and similarly high levels of people trying to kill soldiers, Army officials had to go ask Mom to borrow her uniforms.
You know I was making some jokes earlier, but I mean, this is a life or death situation we're talking about. And they're out there isoluminating in front of of the enemy. I don't like it.
The Army had to start a new search for a pixelated camouflage pattern from scratch by 2010, and the UCP design was soon phased out for literally any other alternative.
So it looks like they just went back to the old trusty American woodland camo, or that original desert camo that worked out so well to stop the Isoluminance. But man, what a lesson, and a very expensive lesson to learn. So, how many Revunicorns do I give the modern desert camo that failed? You guys, one Revunicorn. I'm gonna give it to them for effort because they really had a lot of things against them. You know, a lot of copyrights on other camos, and there's only so much in nature that you can work with, so many colors in nature. So I will give them one Revunicorn for innovation, but you guys, they did not test this product and it didn't work and it sucked. I'm sure it put lives in danger too. So, don't like that. And honestly, the color combination, just all those, it's just kind of boring tan, isoluminating out in the desert. Ew. I don't like it. All right, guys, I'm ready for the next camo style.
This is the Finnish MO5 Winter Snow Camo. As most snow camouflages, it's made from a very thin, light material that does not absorb water, and it's relatively silent.
Aha!
Aha! Aha!
Snow camo, I like it. Okay, so this is what they're wearing in the tundra of Antarctica. This is what they're wearing up in Canada in the snow during these battles and during hunting. You're wearing snow camo. I don't know why I didn't think a lot about it. It makes perfect sense.
The idea is that you're using your normal camouflage, your normal gear that you would use throughout the year, and you have this camouflage packed in your rucksack. Because it's very light, it can be compacted to a very small package, and when the situation arises, you can put this camouflage over your normal gear and blend in with the environment.
You guys, this is such a genius idea. So the snow camo isn't thicker. You would think, if I think snow camo, I would think they make it a white print and they just make it thicker. But no, you wear your regular camo that you would wear when it's not snowing, which is nice and warm, and then you just put this lightweight over it, and it's just another little snow layer. So in essence, because it's just so light and compact, you can pack this away in very little space, and you've got two entire uniforms depending on what the weather is. I love this kind of innovation. This is the kind of thing that gets me excited. What does that tell you about me?
I really like that you can open it up so you can still access your holster. I have the whole battle belt still on.
Genius. This reminds me of a doctor's lab coat. Have you guys ever noticed that? Yes, they do have pockets on the front, but they don't really use them. They have slits on the side so they can actually go into their pants pocket. Does everyone know that? Did you guys know that? Comment down below if you noticed that and you knew that about doctors' lab coats. Fun fact, uniform fact, uniform fact. Since when did I start singing? This is gonna go downhill fast.
But this is an extra small size of jacket and it fits over my gear, so keep that in mind when you are ordering a pair for yourself. Now the cool feature here is that this was intended to be worn over your standard gear, so you have full camouflage, but you can open it up and you can access your magazines and other gear.
Another great use of the zippers, just having it right up top, so everywhere that your uniform would need to be accessed underneath has got a little opening. I love it. This is very well thought out. It's making me happy. I'm experiencing joy.
Now the camouflage works amazingly.
You guys, that looks so good. It really does. He's over there on the left. I can like barely see him. I mean, and if I just like scooch back and squint, I definitely can't see him. This is simple but effective. You guys, some of the simplest ideas are some of the best ideas, and this is an example of it.
I used a combination of tape and white bandage to quickly camouflage my rifle. How you can camouflage your rifle very easily and quite fast. So my preferred method is just a white gaffer tape. Now what is important here is that when you camouflage a rifle,
of course you guys can see here that he's got the tape, the gaffer's tape that he's put all over his weapon. It's camouflaged amazingly, and even over his gloves. I can imagine that a black glove would definitely show up in the snow as like just as something to alert you. So just putting the tape over the gloves makes perfect sense. Man, The military just thinks of everything, don't they?
You do not impede on a normal operation of the gun. Essentially, as you see, it's very crude, it looks kind of funny, but it works very well.
So I was thinking, when I thought about snow camo, I've been thinking about the movie Inception. Do you guys remember when they were in their all white outfits and they had like their all white weapons? But being out, I mean, maybe that's in like the pure snow, but our soldiers being out in the woods or hunting in the woods, you really do need something that's a little more dimensional to have a really good camouflage. So I love this. I do. And especially how he covered his weapon with the gaffer's tape and then used the bandage, because I'm sure those are two things that are really readily available to a woodsman or a soldier. They're always carrying around these, probably in their first aid kit. And so, you know, sometimes you got to use what you got to get it done. And guys, you know, hunters and our military are really smart. They're always using what they've got out in the wilderness to make things happen and get the job done. I love it.
Because it kind of breaks up the shape and the outline of the rifle. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to work.
I love that. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to work. You know, we have this saying at my company when we design uniforms that it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be beautiful, because perfection doesn't exist, but beauty and utility definitely do.
For example, all of the controls have to be able to move, be accessible. For example, the dust cover, it should open. If you camouflage the mag, be careful that it can still be inserted.
I'm dying at his action shots because you know he's not like really hunting. His wife is probably out there like, okay, hon, go. Now, put the rifle, I love it, okay.
Into the gun and it doesn't cause a malfunction.
Whoa. Y'all, I'm dead of his like bad boys to like barrel rolls into the shot. I can tell he's having a lot of fun with this, and I've had a lot of fun looking at it. This guy's very cool, and the snow camo is very, very cool as well. I like this. How many Reviewnicorns do I give the snow camo? Oh my gosh, I give it 4 Reviewnicorns. I give it 4 Reviewnicorns because I love the utility of it. I love how it's made. It's made super light. You're already warm. You just throw this right on over your camo, and honestly, that's it. You're good to go. This is a simple design that works. You can't beat it. All right, guys, so I want to know what you thought. There's so many interesting camos out there. In fact, I think I would love to do this again. Comment below and let me know if you want to see another camo video, and we can try some that are from like way far and some way far out styles. I would really love to review that. So comment down below and let me know what you think. Comment down below and tell me your opinion of these camo styles. What did you think of the lightness and the coolness of the snow camo? Did you think the FANCI Ivory Coast camo was original and cool? Or did you think that the desert camo was as terrible as everyone else thought it was? I would love to know, so please leave me your comments down below. Don't forget, I'm a new YouTuber and I would love it if you subscribed. It's free, so just hit the subscription button and hit the notification bell down below so you don't miss any videos from Reviewniforms and Uniform Expert Reacts. And guys, don't forget the most important thing. It's okay to judge uniforms, but not people. Love everybody.